Grade 7 learners, welcome to English class. Today, you will be learning about non-verbal cue. This lesson will teach us the difference between verbal and non-verbal cues of communication. In this lesson, you are expected to understand the difference of verbal and non-verbal communication cues, recognize the functions of non-verbal communication, and lastly, use appropriate non-verbal cues. But before discussing what the topic is all about, answer first these pre-tests. Identify the cues below and write whether it is verbal or non-verbal cues. Take note, answers only. Write your answer on your paper. What is communication? It is simply the act of transferring information from one place, person, or group to another. There are two kinds: verbal communication and non-verbal communication. What is verbal communication? It is the use of words to convey a message. It is in a form of written or oral communication. On the other hand, non-verbal communication is the transfer of information through the use of body language, including eye contact, facial expressions, and gestures. So, why do we engage or use non-verbal cues in communication? These are the functions or roles of non-verbal communication. First is repetition. It repeats to emphasize one's idea or verbal message. For example, saying okay with your hands and verbally. People often repeat the information contained in the words they have used to say it again, using gestures or vocal sounds. Next is the contradiction. It can contradict the message you are trying to convey, thus indicating to your listener. For example, saying you're not yelling while yelling. It is important to remember that conflicting body language or voice tone do not necessarily mean a person is not telling the truth. It can also be a result of feelings of uncertainty or frustration. For substitution, non-verbal cues could be used as substitute to verbal cues. For example, your facial expression often conveys a far more vivid message ever. Non-verbal cues could complement also your verbal message. Example, patting the back of your friend while praising him can increase the impact. We can complement our verbal communications by standing in a certain way, by using gestures or facial expressions. In order to complement the verbal message, it must have the same kind of meaning. And the last function is accenting. Non-verbal cues may accent or underline a verbal message. Accenting a verbal message is very similar but tends to be used for only specific parts of it, rather than the whole. Accenting can change the meaning to a certain degree. Example, pounding the table can emphasize the importance of the message. Also, pounding your fist, pointing your finger, rolling your eyes up into the side while lifting your head to show dissatisfaction. Now that you already learned what are the purpose of non-verbal communication, it's time to get to know what are the types of non-verbal cues that we are using in non-verbal communication. First is the facial expression. Human face is indeed very expressive. It conveys different emotions without saying a word at all. Example, expressions for happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, fear, and disgust. Next, body movement and posture. It is how you affect one's perception. the way you sit, walk, or carry yourself while delivering your thoughts. And this type of nonverbal communication includes your posture, bearing, stance, and subtle movements you make. Next are the gestures. These are movements of a part of the body, especially a hand or the head, to express an idea or meaning. You may wave, point, or use your hands when arguing or speaking animatedly. Eye contact is the way you look at someone, which can communicate many things. Includes interest, affection, hostility, or attraction. Another type of nonverbal communication is touch. We communicate a great deal through touch. Think about the different messages given by a weak handshake, a warm bear hug, a patronizing pat on the head, for example. Next is voice. It is not just about what you say, but how you say it. Think about how your tone of voice can indicate sarcasm, anger, affection, or confidence. Your first assessment is to compare and contrast verbal from non-verbal cues using the Venn diagram below. The center space is for the similarities of verbal and non-verbal cues. The left space, on the other hand, is for the definition of verbal cues. What have you understand about verbal cues? And the right space is for non-verbal cues. Your second assessment is to identify the function of each non-verbal cues given below. Write whether it is repeating, complementing, substituting, contradicting, or accenting. Answers only. And the last activity, you should state your ideas in a short paragraph. Your composition will be evaluated through the rubrics. Content is 60%, organization is 40%, the total 100%. Thank you for listening and participating. I hope you learned something new in this lesson.